What's going on, everybody? Thank you for tapping back in with About Trout. Today we're spinning up some midges. This is my favorite midge larva of all time, invented by the great one, John Tavner, who's still guiding here on the San Juan today. I don't know exactly how John ties it. This is how I like to tie it. I'm a big believer in the mantra, thin to win, and this pattern knocks it out of the park when it comes to imitating midge larva. You can also fish them as midge pupa. This is my favorite size and my favorite colorway to fish these in and tie them in, but you can mix it up. I do really well with olives, with grays, mixing in other little colors, giving it pops. So you can tweak this however you want and fish it to the size and color that's going to best fit the river that you're guiding or fishing. But this is a 12-month of the year producer, and let's just hop right into it.
All right, let's tie Tavner's Big Mac. I have a Tiemco 200R in the vise in size 22. I'm gonna start about a half eye length behind the eye of the hook, trim off that excess, and I'm gonna just make sure to spin this Semper Nano Silk 18-aught in brown a little counterclockwise to open that denier up, and I'm gonna wrap this to right about where the barb is, just before or right there on the bend. That is satisfactory. Next, we're going to take some micro tubing in brown. You don't want to use midge tubing for these because it's not hollow. This micro tubing will stretch. So what I like to do when I'm tying these is feed this micro tubing into the scissors, pull and cut. And what that's going to do is give you an excellent and very small tie-in point that's going to look just like a little hypodermic needle, if you will. And that is the key. Remember, thin to win, but that little cut right there, and I do think it, as absurd as it is, I do think it makes a difference. That is going to really help you keep this fly without bulk, rather than just wrapping down the micro tubing all from the hook eye all the way down to the bend. Just gonna build up this thread body. Now with this Superfine Nano Silk, outside of the black, some of the other colors, it really fades out. So I'm gonna come in with a Bic honey brown marker, and I'm going to touch these thread wraps, and that's gonna give it that nice brown color. This marker is awesome. I use it on a ton of my patterns to add color. If you watch the video on the root beer betas, that is what I use on this thread as well. Now that we're in there, I'm just gonna palmer this forward. And when we get to the first wrap, I'm gonna pull hard to flatten it out. And then as I move forward, I'll back off the tension so those ribs can really pop. I'm not counting how many times I go around. If you want to, live your truth. But once we get back to where the thread starts, I'm going to pull down on that tubing to compress it, and I'm just going to give it a couple wraps here, pulling that tubing as I wrap the thread around it. Once we got that locked in, I'm just going to pull it back, trim, we're in business. And then for the fun part, we're gonna grab some Solares Bone Dry, and this is just gonna give that fly a lot of durability. If you don't do this, those little trout teeth are really gonna rip this thing to shreds. So I'm just gonna come in here, tap it, just tap it. Less is more for sure. But I don't want it to be like a perdigon, right? So I'm gonna come back in here and kind of touch it so those ribs can pop, and this is really just gonna make that fly so much stronger. We're gonna cook it with this light, and we're almost done. This is an absolute staple in my box. I'm trying to get ahead of the curve on tying these because I blow through these. And again, I like these. This is my favorite color. I also like them in olive. I also like them in gray, or whatever color the midges are where you're fishing. So for the final step, we're just gonna grab a wisp of Superfine dubbing in black. I really like the dubbing. This is how the original is tied. If you wanna skip this step and go real thin, just hit the thread with a black Sharpie and you're good to go. But what I'm gonna do is grab however much you think is a wisp and then cut it in half if you're newer to these. This is gonna be, it just depends on how you want to tie them. Some guys like them with bigger heads, some guys like them with smaller heads, you know. I just split it down the middle. So that looks good to me. And while there's still a little bit of dubbing on there, boom. 1, 2, 3. Gonna do a 3-turn whip finish. Grab that head, pull it back. And just for security, I'll hit it with one more. 1, 2, 3. That 18-aught nano silk is indispensable if you tie small flies, and it doesn't really build bulk. I've pretty much switched to all Semper fly for my tying. I'm gonna trim that thread real quick. And there you go. Pat yourself on the back. You just tied John Tavener's Big Mac. That's an awesome rhyme. My rap album debuts in spring of 2025.
All right, everybody, give yourself a big round of applause. You just tied Tav's Big Mac, available at your local fly shop. If not, super easy to tie. You can knock a bunch of these out. Let me know how they fish for you, and I'll see everybody on the next video. One love.